All praises, all praises, all praises to the heavenly, holy, almighty creator of infinity and all there is. This is Revelations.Unveiled.Detroit. Hello, family. We are back together again, converging and convening, conjugating and convocating. We are here together to partake of some more wisdom and history of the holy nation. All praises. And to the scattered tribes of the house of Jacob, wherever you may sojourn, my continuous petition and prayer for your care and safety, and for my brothers and sisters of the world. We are here, family, in the greatest level of care, compassion, and concern in our consensual assembly. And we are here to become still and to become quiet so that we may receive and perceive as we begin to believe and understand the unveiling and the uncurling and unfurling of the hidden history of the holy nation. And so we shall begin with the slave trade timeline. And tonight we will be gathering the nuggets of wisdom from the years of the 1400s up to 1526. And so, family, we were prefaced by the many wonderful episodes of the pre-American, the pre-colonial history over here in the Western Hemispheres. And we received some wonderful information from Brother Dr. Rudolph R. Windsor from his classic book of history, From Babylon to Timbuktu, where we began our investigation and our collaborative deliberation, starting with Alexander the Greek in 331 BC. And then we had an examination of the destruction of our true homeland of Jerusalem, and then the scattering or the diaspora or the spreading of the holy nation into the interiors of the continent of Ham, or modern-day Africa. And we also evaluated the migrations down the eastern seaboard of the African continent through the northern countries from Egypt through Libya and Tunisia and Algeria and Morocco, and also down into the southern portions, into the central areas through Sudan and Kenya and Niger and Nigeria, into the areas of the Ghanaian empires, all the way down to Angola and the Congo. And we see that the holy nation intermingled with the native African populations and tribes. We also saw the building and the infiltration of the Islamic armies into the African continent as well, where through their conquests they gained many converts as well as slaves that were transported back to the Arabian Peninsula. And so, family, we will now begin to formalize within documented historical dates the timeline of the slave trade. And so as we grasp the hands of our neighbors, as we sit in the Revelations.Unveiled.Detroit den, we shall begin. Before 1400, slavery had existed in Europe from classical times and did not disappear with the collapse of the Roman Empire. Slaves remained common in Europe throughout the early medieval period. However, Slavery of the classical type became increasingly uncommon in Northern Europe, and by the 11th and 12th centuries had been effectively abolished in the North. Nevertheless, forms of unfree labor, such as villeinage and serfdom, persisted in the North well into the early modern period. In Southern and Eastern Europe, classical-style slavery remained a normal part of the society and economy and trade across the Mediterranean and the Atlantic seaboard. It meant that African slaves began to appear in Italy, Spain, southern France, and Portugal well before the discovery of the New World in 1492. From about the 8th century onwards, an Arab-style run slave trade also flourished, with much of this activity taking place in East Africa, Arabia, and the Indian Ocean. In addition, many African societies themselves had forms of slavery, although these differed considerably, both from each other and from European and Arabic forms. Although various forms of unfree labor were prevalent in Europe throughout its history, historians refer to chattel slavery, in which slaves are commodities to be bought and sold rather than domestic servants or agricultural workers. Chattel slavery is the characteristic form of slavery in the modern world, and this chronology is concerned primarily with this form. 1441 through 1444. Lancarote de Freitas, a tax collector from the Portuguese town of Lagos, forms a company to trade with Africa. August 8th, 1444, de Freitas lands 235 kidnapped and enslaved Africans in Lagos, the first large group of African slaves brought to Europe. 1452, the start of the sugar slave complex. Sugar is first planted in the Portuguese island of Madeira, and for the first time, African slaves are put to work on the sugar plantations. June 18, 1452, Pope Nicholas V issues Dum Diversus, a bull authorizing the Portuguese to reduce any non-Christian to the status of slaves. January 8, 1454, Pope Nicholas V issues Romanus Pontifex, a bull granting the Portuguese a perpetual monopoly in trade with Africa. Nevertheless, Spanish traders began to bring slaves from Africa to Spain. 1461, the first of the Portuguese trading forts, the castle at Arguin, modern-day Mauritania, is completed. 1462, the Portuguese colony on the Cape Verde Islands is founded, an important way station in the slave trade. 1462, Portuguese slave traders start to operate in Seville, Spain. 1470, despite papal opposition, Spanish merchants began to trade in large numbers of slaves in the 1470s. 1476, Carlos de Valera of Castile in Spain brings back 400 slaves from Africa. 1481, a Portuguese embassy to the court of King Edward IV of England concludes with English government agreeing not to enter the slave trade against the wishes of many English traders. 1481 through 86, Diogo da Azambuja builds the castle at Elmina, modern-day Ghana, which is to become the most substantial and the most notorious of the slave trading forts in West Africa. 1483, Diogo Cao discovers the Congo River. The region is later a major source of slaves. 1485, Diogo Cao makes contact with the nation of Congo and visits its capital, Mbanza, Congo. He establishes relations between Portugal and Congo. 1486, João Alfonso Aveiro makes contact with the kingdom in the city of Benin. In 1486, Portuguese settle the West African island of Sao Tome. This uninhabited West African island is planted with sugar and populated by African slaves by the Portuguese. The settlement thus extended and developed the sugar slave complex that had been initiated in Madeira. 1487 through 88, Bartolomeo Dias rounds the Cape of Good Hope and explores the Indian Ocean and the East African coast. January 2nd, 1492, the Moorish town of Granada surrenders to the Spanish forces of the Catholic kings, Ferdinand and Isabella, marking the end of the La Reconquista, the war between Moors and Spaniards in the Iberian Peninsula. Both sides retained many slaves taken during the course of war. October 12, 1492, Christopher Columbus becomes the first European since the Viking era to discover the New World, setting foot on an uninhabited island he named San Salvador, modern-day Bahamas. November 3rd, 1493, on his second voyage, Columbus again reaches the New World, modern-day Dominica. On this voyage, he initiates the first transatlantic slave trade, a shipment of several hundred Taino people sent from Hispaniola to Spain. There are doubts about the legality of their enslavement in Spain. December 8, 1493, Columbus founds the first European colony in the New World, La Isabela, on the island of Hispaniola, modern-day Dominican Republic. June 8, 1496, Columbus returns from his second voyage carrying around 30 Native American slaves. Once again, there are doubts about the legality of their enslavement. June 24, 1497, John Cabot, an Italian sponsored by King Henry VII of England, makes landfall on the northern tip of the island of Newfoundland, modern-day Canada. This discovery became the basis of subsequent English claims to North America. April 22nd, 1500, Pedro Cabral of Portugal discovers Brazil, landing at Porto Segura, southern Bahia. 1501 to 1502, Juan de Cordoba of Seville becomes the first merchant we can identify to send an African slave to the New World. Cordoba, like other merchants, is permitted by the Spanish authorities to send only one slave. Others send 2 or 3. 1504, a small group of Africans, probably slaves, captured from a Portuguese vessel, are brought to the court of King James IV of Scotland. 1509, Columbus's son, Diego Colón, becomes governor of the new Spanish Empire in the Caribbean. He soon complains that Native American slaves do not work hard enough. January 22nd, 1510, the start of the systematic transportation of African slaves to the New World. King Ferdinand of Spain authorizes a shipment of 50 African slaves to be sent to Santo Domingo. April 2nd, 1513. Juan Ponce de Leon becomes the first European to reach the coast of what is now the United States of America, modern-day Florida. 1516, the governor of Cuba, Diego Velázquez, authorizes slave-raiding expeditions to Central America. One group of slaves aboard a Spanish caravel rebel and kill the Spanish crew before sailing home. The first successful slave rebellion recorded in the New World. In his book, Utopia, Sir Thomas More argues that his ideal society would have slaves, but they would not be non-combatant prisoners of wars, slaves by birth, or purchases from foreign slave markets. Rather, they will be local convicts or condemned criminals from other countries who are acquired in large numbers, sometimes for a small payment, but usually for nothing. August 18, 1518. In a significant escalation of the slave trade, Charles V grants his Flemish courtier Lorenzo de Gouravad permission to import 4,000 African slaves into New Spain. From this point onwards, thousands of slaves are sent to the New World each year. August 13, 1521, with the capture of King Cuauhua Tomatzin by Herman Cortez and the fall of the city of Mexico, the Aztec Empire is overthrown and Mexico comes under Spanish rule. 1522, a major slave rebellion breaks out on the island of Hispaniola. This is the first significant uprising of African slaves. After this, slave resistance becomes more widespread and uprisings common. 1524, 300 African slaves taken to Cuba to work in the gold mines. 1526, the first enslaved Africans arrive in what is now the United States as part of the San Miguel de Guadalupe colony, most likely located in the Winyah Bay area of present-day South Carolina. Founded by Spanish explorer Lucas Vasquez de Leon in 1526. On October 18, 1526, Leon died, and the colony was almost immediately disrupted by a fight over leadership, during which the slaves revolted and fled the colony to seek refuge among the local natives. Many of the colonists died shortly afterwards of an epidemic, and the colony was abandoned, leaving the escaped enslaved Africans behind in what is now South Carolina. In addition to being the first instance of enslaved Africans in the United States, San Miguel de Guadalupe was also the first documented slave rebellion on North American soil. 1526, Hieronymus Seeler and Heinrich Ehinger of Konstanz become the first Germans we know to have become involved in the slave trade. All right, family, that was our first taste of the slave trade timeline. And as we see, a lot of the structured trade in the enslaved humans started with the Portuguese, and then the Spanish, and then the English, and then the Germans. We also see where the outposts were set up in Madeira and in Ghana. And we also see that Columbus landed in Hispaniola and the Bahamas. He never set foot on United States soil. Ponce de Leon, the discoverer of Florida, was the first one to set foot on American soil. And we see the conquering of Mexico by the Spaniards. And we see the various slave rebellions. And we also see the first colony that had African slaves in South Carolina in 1526. So family, Lord willing, we shall return. We shall continue with our mental marination, contemplation, and deliberation as we put together the mysterious history of the holy nation. And so, until we are together again, I love you. I love you. I love you. This is Revelations.Unveiled. Detroit, the slave trade.